मुझे तो अब्दुल मजीद चौधरी यार. Sir, I've just joined.
Professor Chaudhary, I have sent the link on your WhatsApp.
कर लिया बस ठीक है. He has Arvind. He has joined already.
Okay.
Okay, वो सर
I think
आपके नाम के
मेरे नाम पे वो आ रहे हैं. जरा आमिर साहब आप बता दीजिए. I think Arvind.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Assalamu alaikum, ji. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good morning to everyone, ji. I've just joined. Thanks to Professor Majid. I've used the link on his email, so that's why I think his name is coming. But I'm his student and disciple, so I think I'm proud to carry his name.
Good morning, Professor Bilal, and a very warm welcome to you to this webinar on International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure to be there. I'm honored to be among such company.
Likewise.
Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting for 2 more minutes for all the attendees to join, and then we will start the webinar. So please bear with us for 2 more minutes.
Dr. Ramesh, join.
बहुत जल्दी. ये है इनका टॉपिक जो
See.
Dr. Kumar, may I start?
Yeah, please, Shweta. I think we should start.
Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome on behalf of Healthcare Without Harm, Climate Action Network South Asia, Lung Care Foundation, Doctors for Clean Air and Climate Action, Air Quality Life Index, and Fossil Fuel Treaty. We are a coalition of health and civil society organizations wishing you a very warm greeting on the 2nd International Day for Clean Air for Blue Skies. This is a very important meeting that we are hosting today because we understand that air pollution and climate crisis is not just a challenge for each country in South Asia, but for the region itself. And I mean, air pollution and climate crisis does not have any boundaries. We've also seen there is enough unequivocal evidence that fossil fuels are driving the climate crisis and contributing to the global air pollution. And as a region, South Asia finds itself as one of the most vulnerable regions to the climate crisis and to the air pollution problem. India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, we are one of the worst affected because of air pollution. I mean, there is enough evidence. Out of the 50 worst polluted cities in the world in 2020, 42 were in South Asia region. And that should speak, I mean, that is evidence enough for us to know what threats we face. So that's the context for today's webinar. And before we proceed, I want to quickly set some housekeeping rules so that's easier for us to interact. And I'm sure a lot of you must be familiar with all the housekeeping rules, but I would like to reiterate. All the question answers go in the Q&A chat box that's there. We would try our best to answer them either live or collate them so that we can pose it to our panel at the end of this webinar. Any kind of comments that you would like to make, please make it on chat box, but questions go in question and answer box. Our event flow for the today, and I would like to again make you aware of how this program is set up so that it's easier for us to follow and interact, would be in two parts. The first part would be 3 key speakers who are going to present an overall big picture perspective for on the issue of air pollution and climate crisis for the region. So we have in the first part Mr. Sanjay Vashisht, the Director of Climate Action Network South Asia, who will present. Dr. Arvind Kumar, Founder Trustee of Lung Care Foundation, who would present about air pollution and health, and Dr. Kenneth Lee, Director of Air Quality Life Index, who would give us walk us through some of the facts and figures around this topic. Then we will have a short question answer session to these 3 panelists, and then we will proceed to our super distinguished panel of doctors from the region, which is Dr. Abdul Majid Chaudhry from Pakistan, Lahore, Pakistan, Dr. Ramesh Chokhani from Nepal, Dr. Qazi Benur from Bangladesh, Dr. Novang Norbu from Bhutan, and Dr. Rashna Hazarika from India. And this panel will be moderated by Dr. Arvind Kumar, and we will be talking in depth about air pollution crisis and what health sector and health leaders from the region can do, what are the climate solutions that they can propose, and what kind of regional coordination is required. So that is our panel for the afternoon. And we will also have a very powerful video that this panel, at the end of this panel, we will showcase. After that, we proceed to question and answers, and end of the session. We would like to, we respect everybody's time, and we would like to keep to the 90-minute time frame. And once again, any question and answers, please type it out in the chat, in the question and answer box. With that, I would request the Lung Care Foundation team to please play the opening video, a short 2-minute video, which sets the context, followed by Mr. Sanjay Vashisht's talk.
Hamid, there's no volume, please. Volume share.
Replay. Volume nahi.
Still there is no volume.
Amit, we are not getting volume. Please replay with volume also allowed.
My apologies. We would try it again.
No.
Unfortunately, we are not getting the volume, so we will.
We'll do it later.
Yes. Yes, thank you, sir. Let me invite our first panelist for this. Yes, sir.
Please go ahead with the next part. We'll skip this and we'll come back to it later. Sorry about that.
So no problem. I would like to invite our first panelist for the session, Mr. Sanjay Vashisht, who's the Executive Director of Climate Action Network South Asia. I am not going to go into the details of Mr. Vashisht. He's a renowned person, a climate policy person in the space, and has been active for a couple of decades. I would like Sanjay to focus on climate crisis, fossil fuel, and why it is important for South Asia to think about it. And just give us an overview, Sanjay. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Shweta. I was hoping for this video to set a context, and my inputs would have been, connecting the video that would have been played. But I'll try to improvise now. Basically, I'll touch upon both global warming as well as air pollution. If you look at the normal season cycle that we have studied in our books, in our school days, we have been taught about normal winter, spring, summer, monsoon, and then again winter. That's the cycle that we follow in South Asia. But the new normal, if you look at the kind of challenges that we face, is extreme cold. We start our year with extreme cold, followed by untimely rainfall, especially during the wheat harvesting. Suddenly, rainfall and hail and storm comes. And then later on, a long period of extreme heat and drought conditions in many parts of South Asia, followed by floods in the monsoon period. We know the heavy rainfall going on in Maharashtra, then followed by air pollution time that starts from October onwards and goes on till February. And of course, there is an extreme cold also during that period. So that's the new normal that we deal with in terms of season cycle now. Of course, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has already proven again that the climate change has been caused by human interference in the natural systems, deforestation, transportation, vehicular emissions also leading to carbon emissions in the atmosphere, urbanization. All these has been the factors that has contributed to climate change. And as a result, there are high intensity of impact in the form of disasters. Not only in South Asia, we know that recently New Jersey and New York has been hit by Ida. Cyclone Ida, and that has caused flood conditions there also. So even those who have caused this as a problem are also not spared with it. So while in climate change, that's the status. Even in air pollution, that's the status. There's those who have caused air pollution are getting affected because of this. Whatever we are building as an infrastructure, either in the form of bridges or in the form of urban centers and all that, they all are compromised in the next neo-normal seasons that hit us. And that actually that shows that whatever IPCC has forecasted in terms of extreme rainfall or extreme monsoon or extreme heat conditions and all that, that is a reality now. And if IPCC has forecasted that's going to be extreme, so imagine compared to today how extreme that would be. In fact, that would be more unbearable in future. Fossil fuels are responsible for this, we all know. 6 greenhouse gases are responsible because of coal burning, because of oil, diesel, gas also that emits a lot of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And the concentration of greenhouse gases has gone up to somewhere around 400 ppm already. And 420 ppm is seen as a threshold if we really want to stabilize global temperature as 1.5 degrees. Now, looking at that, while the fossil fuels are responsible for global pollution, global warming, it is also responsible for local air pollution in many areas, and it has certainly costed us a lot. I'll give you some figures which I got from newspaper. Around 54,000 premature deaths in Delhi in 2020. That was the effect of air pollution. 120,000 in India, in Delhi. The 1.7 million Indians were affected. Sorry, I could get figures only for India because of North Indian pollution that we faces every year for last few years. I'm sure North Indian includes starting from Punjab till Bihar. But then I have been told by my colleagues who work in Pakistan that even Lahore is not spared with that impact. So 1.7 million Indians in 2019, and the economic loss has been around $8 billion. So that's the price we pay for air pollution that is happening on a regular basis. Of course, like global warming, air pollution also does not know the borders. It is across the region in South Asia and require a very collaborative approach. In fact, now when it's September 7th and in next 3 weeks or so, starting October, stubble burning of agriculture waste will start in Punjab and Haryana. And that would, and of course, vehicular pollution. And on top of it, the cold, air that will start coming from Himalayas, bringing winter in North India, that will lead to air pollution, because the all the air polluted is remain on the in the lower periphery of the atmosphere, and that will go until February. In fact, air quality index refused to measure beyond 999. That's the highest limit, and it doesn't show data beyond that, unfortunately. This year again, it is expected that there will not be any respite, though government has taken a lot of measures, but because of elections in Punjab and in Uttar Pradesh, many of the farmers has been given clean chit and they will not face any prosecution. And that would mean we will have another season of air pollutions in 2021 also. Of course, this leads to burden on health practitioners. And like we say in global warming, that adaptation has a limit. Similarly, response has a limit. It needs to be addressed at the source. So fossil fuels need to phase out. They need to go out as soon as possible. The public transport need to be encouraged in South Asia, and a collaborative approach of exchanging the data between countries is important. Because that leads to addressing the problem in a more comprehensive manner, rather than in a very within a national boundary in a very cosmetic manner. So I'll stop here. I hope I've taken my 10 minutes, Shweta, but I'll stop here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Sanjay. And once more, we will attempt to show the video, because I think whether earlier or later, the video will add more context to what you've said, and in a audiovisual lively fashion. So.
आपको वो गाना याद होगा, कल क्या होगा किसको पता, अभी जिंदगी का ले लो मजा। सही है, बहुत मजे ले लिए और अपनी जिम्मेवारियों को नजरअंदाज करते रहे साफ हवा और क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में। हाल ही में एक रिसर्च सामने आई है, सन 2050 तक विश्व का तापमान औसतन 1.5 डिग्री बढ़ जाएगा। आप तो होंगे ना? शायद आप बिजी थे और यह खबर नजर के सामने से फिसल गई होगी। आप शायद ये भी सोच रहे होंगे कि 1.5 डिग्री तापमान बढ़ने से कितना फर्क पड़ेगा। फर्क पड़ता है। 1.5 डिग्री तापमान बढ़ने से समुद्र का स्तर बढ़ेगा और दुनिया के कई हिस्से पानी में डूब जाएंगे, जिसमें भारत के कई तटवर्ती शहर भी हैं, जैसे मुंबई, चेन्नई, गोवा, विशाखापट्टनम, कोचीन इत्यादि। क्या सोच रहे हैं? जब तक समुद्र का पानी आपके घर के बाहर तक नहीं आ जाता, तब तक आप गाते रहना चाहते हैं, कुछ ना करो, कुछ भी ना करो। सोचिए, सीरियसली सोचिए, कुछ समझिए, कुछ कीजिए। वो समय आ गया तो प्रकृति और सरकार को दोष मत दीजिएगा।
Thank you, LCF team, for making this video happen. I think it very crisply and beautifully summarizes what Sanjay has talked about planetary health. And I would like to now invite Dr. Arvind Kumar, who is, again, needs no introduction. He's a champion of clean air and health, not just in India, but globally. and he's the founder trustee of Lung Care Foundation and the vision behind the Doctors for Clean Air and Climate Action. I would like, Dr. Kumar, sir, I would like you to talk about human health, fossil fuel, air pollution, climate change, and human health impact, and why residents in South Asia need to be concerned and need to do something.
Thank you, Shweta, and a very warm good morning to all our distinguished guests from India, and most importantly, a very, very warm good morning to our distinguished friends from South Asian regions, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan, and a warm good morning to Dr. Kenneth Lee. I don't know which part of the world he's joining from, but a warm welcome to you too, sir. The context has already been set by this video, which very elegantly portrayed the problem that we are going to face in the coming few years. It's very much there. Up till now, we used to feel whether it will come or not, but now we know it's very much there, and we are going to be hit by it sooner than expected. So, fossil fuels, climate change, and health. This presentation comes to you from Lung Care Foundation. Just a few definitions. Climate change is a systematic change in the long-term state of the atmosphere over multiple decades or longer, and it has been mainly driven by human activities, the prime example being fossil fuel burning, which increases the heat trapping greenhouse gas levels in Earth's atmosphere, thereby raising the Earth. This is a very important slide which shows what happens normally or had been happening till a few years back, which is in the left half of the slide, and what is happening today. So we all know that carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, ozone, CFC, and water vapor, these are the 6 greenhouse gases. If you focus on the left half of the slide, so normally the solar radiation penetrates through the atmosphere, comes to our outer atmosphere, but most of the heat is re-radiated back and it escapes into the outer atmosphere because there is nothing to stop it from escaping out. So we have very little heat, just the amount that we require coming to us. And see on the right hand side, what's happening today when we have a thick layer of greenhouse gases in the outer atmosphere. The solar radiation which is coming to the Earth is not getting re-radiated, it is getting converted or redirected back towards the Earth because of this thick envelope of greenhouse gases. So there is less heat which is escaping back into the space, thereby leading to global warming. Now it's unequivocal that human influences has warmed the atmosphere, the oceans, and everything else. And this has happened, warmed the climate at a rate that is unprecedented in the last 2000 years. Now, how do we know? The planet's average surface temperature is already up by 1.18 degrees Celsius since the 19th century, largely driven by carbon dioxide, the levels of which in the last few years have risen much more and much faster than in several thousand years before that. Now, global warming of 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius will be exceeded during the 21st century unless we take special measures to reduce the carbon dioxide and other green gases. The oceans are getting affected, the atmosphere is getting affected, the jungles, the other areas are getting affected. So there is a widespread damage that is occurring. And what is happening? Our oceans are getting warmer and they are becoming acidic because of the absorption of carbon dioxide. Our Greenland is losing billions and billions of tons of ice, and therefore glaciers are retreating. The glaciers are retreating almost everywhere. The ice is melting, and all this is going to lead to what Rajiv very elegantly conveyed in the video, a mean sea level rise by several centimeters. Now, this is going to create havoc, which he has already portrayed in the video. And there is enough evidence that the temperatures are rising. And this has happened consistently for the last so many years. The large global changes result in a global effect as well as local effect on the weather and climate. So there are higher average temperatures, there are dry areas and hotter hotspots. There are severe heat events, droughts, rains, cyclones, floods. And if you look at the news of the last couple of years, you would realize that each of the events which is mentioned in the slide here is occurring at a greater frequency in the last few years. So it won't be wrong, friends, to say that climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. And this is not just a chemical issue or an environmental issue. Why someone like me is deep into it is because it has huge health ramifications. The injury, illness, and death will occur due to weather events. There will be an increase in the cardiovascular and respiratory diseases due to increased air pollution. There will be food and water insecurity due to reduced crop yields and poor quality water, which will create more problems. There will be an increase in the vector-borne diseases like dengue fever, malaria, and what have you because of the warmer weather and change in the rainfall patterns. And there will also be a huge amount of mental health and other issues because of the extreme. So people have predicted different figures, but they all are huge figures. The basic necessities will be disrupted. There will be problem with the food supply chain. There will be problem with the quality of air. There will be problem with the water availability, and all this will lead to huge death, disease, and devastation. The rising temperatures will lead to respiratory and other problems. The extreme weather events will lead to huge number of problems in the entire population. But the saddest part is that people living in less privileged area who have contributed the least to the climate change will be the worst affected because they live in environments where the effect will be maximum. Their ability to tolerate is minimum and their susceptibility is highest. So the ones who have contributed the minimum, particularly South Asia, they will be the worst affected. This is the saddest part of it. And if you look at the images of last few years, whether it was wildfires in Turkey, Australia, in Amazon forest, all kinds of cyclones across the world, the floods across the world in areas hitherto unknown, China, all various parts of India. I mean, you just have to skip through the newspapers and you will realize that it is not something which is going to come a decade or two later. Friends, it's there, it's there. But the sad part is, are we prepared to face it? Well, unfortunately, we are not. What to do? We just have to reduce carbon emissions across energy, transport, food, industry, agriculture, and all other sectors, and shift lock, stock, and barrel to renewable sources of energy like solar, wind, and water across all the sectors. Friends, I dare say that if fossil fuels continue to be used at the present pace, the day is not far when the human race may become a fossil. And therefore, who better in this position to take up this issue and wage a war than doctors? Why doctors? Well, the answer is obvious. Friends, we are the people who are going to see, or we are already seeing the effect of these changes. And when we talk to people that, friends, it's not a chemical issue, it's not a temperature issue, it's a health issue, it's a survival issue, people will listen to us. So we, the doctors, are motivated people, and we are in a much better position to motivate. So therefore, why should this motivator group not take leadership across Southeast Asia and create an example for the doctors from across the world to follow? So this Doctors for Clean Air is not an India-based or a Delhi-based organization. Any doctor who feels for this topic, whose heart beats for this topic, is welcome to join and contribute. And we have over 11 major associations in India, surgeons, physicians, gynecologists, and many more who have already contributed. Friends, we, the doctors, are an important and powerful voice which can make a difference. And I think it is time that all of us from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, all the countries which are going to be worst affected, we all join together, reach this information to our policymakers, to our public, to our people, and start a movement here which truly and very surely will become global in nature. Thank you very much.
Dr. Kumar, thank you. This was absolutely phenomenal and amazing presentation that you have covered, from the basics to the importance of health, and the most important part, that the importance of health leadership to examine this issue from the health lens and guide the policymakers in decision making that keeps health at the center of all decision making and ensures that human health and planetary health is protected going forward. I would now like to invite Dr. Kenneth Lee, the Director of Air Quality Life Index, who's also, and Dr. Lee is also a Senior Research Associate at the Department of Economics and University of Chicago, to share his presentation and his group's research, which is I think very important to consider in terms of implications of air pollution on people's health in South Asian region, just to add the layer of science and evidence that AQLI has put together, which is very important for us to know as how we incorporate this in our interventions with policymakers, with our peers and communities that we serve. So Dr. Lee,
Thank you so much, Shweta. I just want to say that it's a great honor to be participating in this webinar with so many amazing doctors and professionals working on clean air and environmental issues in the South Asia region. I'm currently in North America, but as Dr. Kumar would know, South Asia holds a big place in my heart, and I spent a few wonderful years in Delhi getting to know some of you. My presentation today, let's see, can you see this? Great. Okay, so I'm going to give highlights from our latest 2021 AQLI annual update. And I've prepared some slides here just to quickly walk you through some of the things that we find. Our research indicates that air pollution is the greatest external threat to human health globally. And as we all know, it's primarily caused by fossil fuel combustion. Now, as many of the doctors in this webinar could explain, scientists have shown for decades now that exposure to particulate pollution leads to increased rates of mortality and morbidity. But in many places in the world, awareness remains relatively low, and there's a need for greater policy action. We recently updated the AQLI using data on PM2.5 levels globally from 2019. All of the reports are available on our website. And when we talk about air pollution, we tend to face two common questions. How bad is air pollution in my community, the community where I live? And what effect does sustained exposure to air pollution have on my life expectancy? Now, a key factor that answers all these questions is data. But in many parts of South Asia, there are very little ground level monitors, very little data that's available. But satellites provide reliable, geographically sensitive pollution coverage, even in places where there is no ground level data. And so here's a snapshot of satellite-derived PM2.5 levels across South Asia in 2019. You can see that this is the part of the world that is the darkest on the map, meaning the pollution is the highest. And the pollution is really extremely high across the Indo-Gangetic Plains, as well as this part of Bangladesh and here in Pakistan. So when we look at the time trends of the satellite data, we see that South Asia by far has the highest levels of PM2.5 concentrations in the world. Not only that, it's been rising for the past 10 to 15 years. On the other hand, you see China used to have some of the worst air pollution in the world, but since 2012 or 2013 or so, has been able to decrease its average concentrations by about 30% through clean air policies. As Dr. Kumar explained, air pollution is being exacerbated by climate change. As we've been seeing over the past couple of years, climate change is causing drier conditions, droughts, and we're seeing wildfires create PM2.5 that travels thousands of miles, reaching populations that aren't even used to having air pollution. So one view of the future world is one in which air pollution becomes even worse as the climate continues to warm. So what is the impact of sustained exposure to particulate air pollution on life expectancy? So my colleagues and our team at the Energy Policy Institute at UChicago created the Air Quality Life Index, which converts air pollution concentrations into their impact on life expectancy. The AQLI essentially combines the satellite data that I showed you with economics research estimating the causal impact of sustained exposure to pollution on life expectancy. And what it does is the research actually takes advantage of a natural policy experiment in China that exposed one group of people to a much higher level of pollution than another. And so over time, the researchers were able to isolate the causal effect of pollution exposure from other factors that affect health. And the relationship that they came to was roughly each additional 10 microgram per cubic meter increase in PM2.5 reduces life expectancy by 0.98 years. So combining the satellite data with the research estimates, the AQLI lets users zoom into any community in the world and answer the question, how much longer would the people here live if air pollution complied with the WHO guideline? So what we find is that the life expectancy impact of PM2.5 exposure is the highest amongst all of the leading causes of death in the world. PM2.5 kills more people than child and maternal malnutrition, poor water and sanitation, and even active smoking. The impacts of air pollution are also the greatest in South Asia. So here are some snapshots. In India, the average PM2.5 level in 2019 was 70.5 micrograms per cubic meter. If India were able to reduce that to 10 micrograms per cubic meter, which is the WHO guideline, the implication of the research is that the average person would gain 5.9 years of life expectancy. That number is 5.4 years in Bangladesh, 5 years in Nepal, 3.9 years in Pakistan, 2.4 years in Bhutan, and 0.9 years in Sri Lanka. The impacts of air pollution are even greater in the Indo-Gangetic Plains, which is the region that faces the most extreme levels of air pollution in the world. So here's a zoom in on Uttar Pradesh, and you can see that PM2.5 in Lucknow, for instance, was 123.7 micrograms per cubic meter in 2019. That's more than 12 times higher than the WHO standard. And you can see on the left that since 1998, there's been an upward trend in this state. Across South Asia, PM 2.5 has increased by about 36%. And that implies that average life expectancies have decreased by 1.7 years as a result. One thing I wanted to point out was that air pollution is worsening in places that are typically not associated with extreme air pollution. So this is a zoom in on the state of Maharashtra in India. Even in Mumbai, which is a coastal city where you would expect the air quality to be good, PM 2.5 has increased from roughly 30 micrograms per cubic meter in 2000 to nearly 50 micrograms per cubic meter today. Now, there are some points for optimism. In 2014, China announced a war on pollution, and they rolled out a series of different policies tackling some of their coal power plants, increasing the targeted emission reductions. They changed the different kinds of incentives that the bureaucrats had. And since then, they've seen a 30% decline in PM 2.5. And because of that, if they can sustain those reductions, the people of China will live longer as a result. And so the last point that I wanted to make is that the AQI illustrates that billions of life years are at stake, especially in South Asia, where there is not only some of the highest air pollution in the world, but some of the highest population densities. And what this means to me is that the benefits of clean air policies, as costly as they may be, are likely to vastly exceed are likely to vastly exceed all of those costs on net. And if you look at what the life expectancy gain might be on average from a 30% permanent reduction in PM 2.5, so similar to what China achieved in about 6 years, you see that there are massive gains to be had across the region. And so I think that we should take this message to push back on the point that it is too expensive to cut down on fossil fuel combustion, or it is too expensive to require industries to reduce their emissions, because the benefits to human lives are likely to be much greater. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for this wonderful presentation and walking us through the data and making sense of it. Now we would like to open up the panel for question answers, and I have one question for you, I think, Ken, in the chat box that I'm going to read out in the question answer box. The question is, just a second, it is from Mr. Srinivas Darak, and the question is how appropriate it is to consider linear relationship between PM 2.5 and mortality. Also, while estimating the life expectancy, is it life expectancy at birth, or how is it duration of export and lag effect considered in the analysis? Ken?
Yeah, I think so could you repeat the second question again? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it says, also while estimating the life expectancy, is it the life expectancy at birth, or how is it the duration of export and lag effect, exposure and lag effect in considered in the analysis?
Yeah, I think these are two fantastic questions. Thank you for bringing them up. To address the first question about the linear relationship, I think that you're pointing out a very, very good, very reasonable issue here. It's possible that as people are exposed to higher and higher levels of pollution, the marginal impact of that pollution exposure could have a different type of effect on someone's health. I think the point that I'd like to make is that across the board, there's a lot of gaps in the research on the impacts of air pollution on health. For instance, much of the public health research uses cohort studies, which are observational in nature. And so it's a little bit difficult to separate whether health impacts are being caused by air pollution or something else that's correlated with both pollution and health. So that could be the state of hospitals and healthcare, really related to economic development. So there is an issue with finding experiments where you could identify a causal effect. Now the AQI research is basically a quasi-experimental setting where the Chinese government introduced a policy that unintentionally exposed one group of people to much higher levels of pollution over the long term. In that setting, average PM 2.5 was roughly 70 micrograms per cubic meter. So that's a setting where we estimate an effect, and then we try to extrapolate that effect to other settings, to other highly polluted settings, to come up with what the implied life expectancy impact might be. So what I'm saying is that if you were to take a research study in a setting with 70 micrograms per cubic meter, and then try to make a strong case about applying that slope, that relationship, to a setting with 5 micrograms per cubic meter, then this issue of linearity, I think, is very important because you're really extrapolating out of sample. But if you look at pollution levels in South Asia, the only setting that is similar to this in recent history where studies have been conducted is China during China's very polluted industrializing phase. You cannot take, well, it's much more difficult to take research from, say, the east coast of the United States or from Canada or from Northern Europe, where pollution levels are much lower, and then to make assumptions about how that functional form changes at higher pollution levels and extrapolate that to India. So I think that we have to try to use the research that's out there. And in doing so, we have to make some assumptions about applying them. So we try to do the simplest thing possible, which is to use a linear or just a direct extrapolation to make this point that air pollution is the greatest threat to human health. And in highly polluted places in South Asia, the impacts are potentially extremely large, much larger than what anyone's thought thus far. I think the second question was, so Shweta, should I go on or?
There are a couple of more questions, Ken, so maybe we can look at that and then kind of, if we have time, we will go on to the second question. Sure. Or I would also like to invite you to type your answers to the second question if in case we go above time for this session. I have one more technical question for you, Samrat, and I have a question, I'm sorry, Ken, and then I have a question for Sanjay. Ken, your question from Mr. Samrat Sengupta is, and it has been noted that during the first strict lockdown in rural India in 2019, the PM 2.5 and PM 10 was still few multiple higher than WHO standards, which indicates that it's not 100% dependent on industry, transportation, and thermal power plants, but maybe inefficient burning of biomass at rural households, mostly for cooking, as heating requirements are negligible during that time in India. What's your understanding on the same? That's a question for you, Ken, and I'll quickly also read out the question for Sanjay, and then both of you can respond one after another. Sanjay, the question for you is, what is the status of SAARC Thimphu Declaration on Climate Change? So please note that. I also have a range of questions that are coming in of this thing, and I will point. I will go to them after Ken and Sanjay you respond.
Sure. I think that I think that's a great question as well. I have read research, so we haven't done these kinds of source apportionment studies on our own, but I have read research and summaries of research indicating that household air pollution is one of the major causes or major contributors to ambient air pollution. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that even when transportation activities and industrial activities are cut down by a significant share during the lockdown, that you still have a lot of air pollution coming from household sources. And so I think that this really emphasizes why we're gathered here today to try to raise awareness of this issue, is because we need to collectively work to increase awareness of the health impacts of air pollution, the causes of air pollution, and create demand for the clean air policies or the government investments that would allow people to substitute other cleaner sources of cooking fuel compared to what they're using today in some of the rural areas. So I don't have more to say about the source apportionment and what happened in the lockdown, but that does sound accurate to me.
Dr. Kumar, would you like to comment?
I would just like to add to what Ken said. So when we look at the causes for air pollution in the urban areas, it is not only the industry, the transport sector, all these sectors contribute. When we go to rural areas, it is the wood burning for cooking purposes and for various other purposes, which is one of the major contributors there. And during lockdown, this activity did not stop because the cooking of food did continue during lockdown also. In fact, it was cooked more. So that could be one reason why the PM 2.5 levels in the rural areas did not decrease substantially as much as they did in the urban areas, where stopping of vehicles led to a drastic reduction.
Thanks, Dr. Kumar. Sanjay, your response,
Yeah.
and after that, Dr. Kumar, I will take one question for you, and we will move on to the next next segment. Sanjay, your response, please.
Yeah, Shweta. SAARC Thimphu Climate Declaration was agreed in 2010. Of course, it was a political declaration where all head of the states agreed to take action on climate change. But in terms of implementation, CANSA did an assessment in 2014 of where SAARC declaration stands in terms of implementation, and we found big gaps. In fact, even policies had never existed, were never framed when they after the 2010 declaration. So certainly there has been big gaps. However, later SAARC again met and also spoke about promotion of renewable energy and also about regional grid, which CANSA has been advocating for last many years. And now slowly when we are looking at renewable energy grid, there is a very positive approach towards that. But we will see most of the SAARC declaration of Thimphu as well as climate change now exist within the national boundaries of countries in the form of national demand contributions or national adaptation plans. But unfortunately, they will not be effective if they remain within national boundaries. They need to be spread and coordinated within the regional boundary.
Thanks, Sanjay. Dr. Kumar, one quick question for you, and I would request all panelists to please go to the Q&A chat box and try to respond to questions that are coming up here. Dr. Kumar, there is a question from Ritu P, which says, is there any evidence on what health communication about climate change achieves in terms of local policy changes and behavior change at community level?
Well, there is a lot of evidence that for action to be taken on any problem, the first thing that is needed is awareness of that problem, awareness of the magnitude and the gravity of that problem, how it is impacting you, and then only you can expect a corrective action to come. Sadly, what has happened is that the health ill effects of air pollution and also all the effects of climate change, these are even today, despite so much of media attention, not known to public as well and in as much depth as they need to be. And that is one of the reasons why these topics tend to be neglected. And that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges, to apprise people of the gravity of the situation. And after that only, we can expect people to participate and accept the policies laid down by the government, which will be in short term inconvenient to them, but in the long term, far more benefit giving. Shweta.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Thank you for your response. Once again, request to all participants to type in your questions in the Q&A box, and request all panelists to please have a look at those questions and try to respond. There are many questions coming in. That's an evidence that there's a lot of interest, and we would like to ensure that most of these questions are answered. Having said that, I would also like to highlight one resource that Doctors for Clean Air, Lung Care Foundation, Healthcare Without Harm, CANSA, and other partners had put together earlier this year, which is a guidance document on climate and health for health professionals and generally for the public also. I've shared the link in the chat box. Please look at the guidance document. It's a very good resource to have. With this, I would like to now transition to the second and a very important segment in this webinar. I would like to invite Dr. Arvind Kumar to moderate this session. And this is a panel with our distinguished health leaders from the region, from Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. And this panel the main focus of this panel is to talk about issues that health professionals are facing in context of air pollution and climate change in their region, and what are the climate solutions that we can propose together. Dr. Kumar, I would request you to please moderate this session and welcome the panelists.
Thank you, Shweta. And it's indeed an honor for me to be moderating this very, very important and maybe a landmark session, because I think it will be the beginning of a great collaboration and cooperation between the various countries in South Asia amongst health professionals towards achieving the goal of clean air. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Qazi Banur. Dr. Qazi Banur, if you could just wave your hand, sir. Dr. Qazi Banur is Assistant Professor, Respiratory Medicine at National Institute of Diseases of Chest and Hospital, Dhaka, also the Joint Secretary of Bangladesh Lung Foundation. He'll be giving us the perspective from Bangladesh. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Abdul Majid Chaudhry from Lahore, Pakistan. He's a member Board of Governors, Cancer Research and Treatment Foundation, Senior Consultant Surgeon, former Principal, Lahore Medical College, and someone who devotes a lot of time to these kind of public issues. It's my pleasure to also welcome Professor Wasim, Professor Asad, Professor Shumail, Professor Shazia, and Professor Amir Bilal, who also have joined us from Lahore and from Peshawar. Well, all of you friends from Pakistan, it's indeed a pleasure and an honor to have you here, and we are indeed grateful to all of you for sparing your time and joining us. My pleasure to introduce Dr. Ramesh Chokhani. Dr. Ramesh Chokhani is President, Nepalese Respiratory Society. He's a Senior Consultant Pulmonologist at Novik International Hospital, Kathmandu, Nepal. Dr. Ramesh, welcome to you, sir. My pleasure to introduce Dr. Nawang Norbu. He's Director, Bhutan Ecological Society, Head Max Planck Research Partner Group in Bhutan. Dr. Norbu, it's a pleasure to have you. And last but not the least, my pleasure to introduce my dear colleague, Dr. Rashna Hazarika from Guwahati, Northeast India. Dr. Rashna is a practicing pediatrician, very, very active member of the Doctors for Clean Air Network, someone who's very passionate about this topic and devotes a lot of time. Indeed, it's an honor to have all of you. And this session is all about giving perspectives from your areas on 3 issues: the need for regional collaboration and role of health leadership, highlighting the urgency on the action based on the recent IPCC report, and highlighting the fact that climate and air pollution crisis knows no border, and therefore the whole of South Asia should be acting as one block rather than individual countries. So if I may start from Professor Abdul Majid Chaudhry, sir, I would hand over the mic to you. We have 20 minutes for this session. There are 5 speakers, so I would request each one of you to take about 2 to 3 minutes. Give the perspective of pollution in your country, your views on what role the health professionals should be playing, and the need for South Asian cooperation. Professor Abdul Majid Chaudhry, sir.
Greetings from Lahore to all the participants and all the friends from Southeast Asian countries. I must commend the efforts of Professor Arvind Kumar, an old friend, for highlighting this very, very serious health problem globally. I think in this part of the world, there has been an uncontrolled population explosion. That's one reason. I think anything and everything which in the form of development is done becomes disproportionate with the passage of time. The public transport in Southeast Asia is not really the ideal one. So people have to go after their own and own transport. And look at Delhi, or look at Lahore, or look at Peshawar, and look at Dhaka. I think they are desperately overcrowded. And that's one big problem that, we are having such a big pollution. And, and with this population, the cities have expanded, and all the kilns which were used to be outside the premises of the city, they have been now included in the city itself. And of course, the factories as well. And I think, and the other thing, particularly in Punjab, both in Indian Punjab and Pakistani Punjab, at the end of the cultivation, it's very easy to burn the remains of the crops. And I tell you, it's a big, big problem, both in India and depending upon, of course, the flow of air. From Pakistan, it goes to India or vice versa. So that's another very big problem. I think as doctors, we need to sensitize our governments, we need to sensitize people, and advise the government and the government and of course the political elites that this is a big problem in whole of this region. It's honestly nothing to be proud of, that 42 most polluted cities of the world, they are in this part of the world. Honestly, it's very sad. And I think, we need to, I think the SAARC organization has to be very active. I think irrespective of their differences, I think they must join hands to curb this pollution in whole of the region. I think that will be service not only to the region, but service to humanity. These are my comments. And the other thing is that I think the jungle mafias in whole of this region, they have been going unabated. And the cutting of trees and widening the roads, I think that has done another thing. In Pakistan, they have planned to have 1 billion tree transplantation. I think it should be done every year, everywhere. And that's probably one way one can, curb this menace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for highlighting that it's actually a major problem in Pakistan as well. Sensitization of people is an important task. Doctors can play an important role, and also for highlighting the need that all of us in South Asia need to collaborate. And if we do that, I think we'll be augmenting the efforts of each other. Thank you very much, sir. I now move to Dr. Qazi Bennoor from Bangladesh, who would bring us the perspective from Dhaka and also the views from Bangladesh Lung Foundation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. It's really a great pleasure for me and an honor for me to be in this August platform. I would not elaborate much about this excellent initiative. It is already has been internationally acknowledged that this type of initiative is very much important, and we all should do the best to make this platform successful. So regarding Bangladesh, as you all know, and already Dr. Kenneth Lee has very elaborately picturized the situation of Bangladesh, that here, including Dhaka, many cities are turning into gas chambers because of the increased and low quality vehicles, two-stroke engines and starting like that, because of the unplanned industrialization, because of the cities are surrounded by many unauthorized big fields, and also industrial developments, some ship breaking, and also in some areas there is strong crashing for the development of roads and others. This are adding to the havoc. I would like to go back to some history that Bangladesh Lung Foundation has started its function about 22 or 23 years back, and about 12 or 14 years back, I think so, 14 years back, we did a air pollution study in the Dhaka city. Here, the Department of Environment divided the Dhaka city in 4 zones according to the air pollution level, and they set a standard for the pollution level at that time. Those areas were industrial areas, commercial areas, residential areas, and sensitive areas like hospitals, schools, etc. We did some air pollution studies there. We calculated the amount of pollutions in the air, including the particulate matters and other gases. And we found that in every area, all the matters are much higher than the standards set by the government of Bangladesh. And interestingly, this scale was higher than the scale declared by WHO, even though we are not maintaining that scale. And later on, we did a COPD, nationwide COPD study. And we, at that time, usually knew that COPD is caused by smoking mainly. And for that, we thought that the women who are not readily smoker in our country will not be suffering from COPD much. But very surprisingly, we found that the women are suffering a lot from COPD, and the village women are the most sufferers. And we probed into the matter, and we found that the burning of fossil fuels and woods and dry leaves in the cooking stoves are the cause behind this increased COPD among the women. So since then, we realized about the menace of air pollution in our country, not only in the urban area, but also in the rural areas. So later on, we did some studies on what I have said, that the increased number of silicosis among the border areas where the stone crashing is higher, and also in the port areas where the ship breaking is becoming an industry here. There are many patients of asbestosis also. So we started thinking about it from Lung Foundation, and we categorized that the doctors have to do something in this area, because in this part of the world, doctors are next to God, to the people. They believe in doctors' word very much. So if we come forward, it will make a big difference. Awareness of the general people is the #1 factor for mitigating any problem. So if we doctors combine together and we run awareness programs and the general people, it will make a big difference, no doubt. Side by side, we have to convince the policy makers by knocking them again and again. If we can make a political consensus about this air pollution, we can find a good result, because there are many laws against this air pollution, against this brick fields, against this cutting of trees, but it is not implemented. So we need a political decision, strong political decision in this area. Also, we can do some, and we had already done some grassroots level small works, such that when we found that the women are suffering from the stoves, we have distributed a number of improved stoves, which are not emitting much smoke, which is developed by the Science Council of Bangladesh, and it has given a good result. The number of sufferers has lessened by last 5 years considerably. So we can come forward, because the problems are same in this area, in this South Asian region, almost same. So if we combine, and if we do the works here, I think it will have a very, very good result on the, and we can very strongly raise our voice against this air pollution and the fossil fuel. So I congratulate you all that we are in a good platform here, and I hope under the very strong and able leadership of Dr. Arvind Kumar, we can march forward for a better future. Thank you, everyone.
First of all, I'll differ with you. There is no leadership of Dr. Arvind Kumar. Dr. Arvind Kumar, Dr. Abdul, Dr. Ramesh, Dr. Kazi, Dr. Norbu, Dr. Hazarika, Dr. Kenneth Lee, each one of us whose face is seen here is a leader and is a leader and is a leader. So there is no single
Okay,
leader.
sir, I admit, but you are the leader of the leaders.
I thank you, Dr. Kazi, for highlighting the studies done by Bangladesh Lung Foundation. I thank you for also pointing out a very pertinent point that in this part of the world, all of us, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, we all have many laws which exist. Where we fail is not in having laws, but in implementation of these laws. This is another thing which is common. You very rightly pointed out that awareness is the key issue. You mentioned the interventions done by Bangladesh Lung Foundation. Similar intervention has been done in our country also in the form of gas stoves given to rural people, which I think is something which can be replicated across the whole region. And for at the end, pointing out that a cooperation amongst us will benefit everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Kazi, for your comments. And I now move to Dr. Ramesh Chokhani from Kathmandu for his views. Dr. Ramesh.
Thank you very much, Professor Arvind, for inviting me in this gathering. And it's my pleasure to be a part of this program. Incidentally, one study in Nepal has shown that one of the major contributors of air pollution in Nepal is biomass fuel burning. And although even fossil fuels are definitely also there, which contribute to the air pollution, but the major chunk of the pollution is due to biomass fuel burning, which is mainly from the residential use of wood logs burning for cooking. And even in many of our villages in the Tarai, people use dried cow dung cakes for burning. So these are some of the important contributors. Then we also have in the months of March, April, we have lost lots of forest fires, which contribute to the air pollution. And transports, of course, using fossil fuels are another important reason. And industries emitting a lot of gases are yet another reason. One study has also shown that in Nepal, about 35,000 people die annually due to illnesses caused by air pollution. And there is another study which has, as Dr. Kenneth Lee pointed out, that in our country, if we maintain the air pollution standards as recommended by WHO, there can be a gain of life by up to 5 years in life expectancy. One of the burning problems in the country among the medical problems is COPD. We have lots of patients with COPD. In fact, it is the #2 problem here among the medical illnesses. And we also have a large chunk of female COPD patients who are non-smokers. And majority of them, they have probably developed the disease due to use of biomass fuels in their kitchens, in poorly ventilated kitchens. And last year, during the time of the pandemic, when there was a lockdown, there was a 50% reduction in the contaminants in the air observed in the month of April. And one of the possible reasons was because of less use of automobiles in that. But the household combustion remained a problem. Now, some of the things that we have observed and we have recommended to our patients and people is they should switch to alternative ways of cooking, like use of electric stoves or biogas plants. And avoid burning household residues and industrial residues and wastes. And we also have a big potential of water resources, and our country is seriously thinking of tapping these resources and developing more hydropower projects rather than coal-based plants. And we could also potentially use wind power to generate electricity, and even solar energy has a big potential in my country for generation of electricity. Some of the other areas that we have realized is improvement in public transportation in the cities, because majority of our people cannot afford private vehicles. So that could definitely contribute in reducing the pollution levels. Also, one study in Kathmandu has seen that nearly 40% of the travel in Kathmandu Valley is done on foot. So we need to develop better infrastructures in our cities for the pedestrians. And also the cities are small, the distances are not much. So even improving cycle lanes in the cities could be another way of reducing pollution in our the small cities in Nepal. And another effort which has also been done by our government is to promote electric vehicles and to develop infrastructure to support electric vehicles. And that in the coming years probably will also help in reducing the air pollution in our country. And as Dr. Abdul Majid pointed out, I think SAARC is a very big platform, and it should play a very important role in our region to coordinate between the governments and promote better air for all of us. Thank you very much for inviting me once again.
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh. It's so surprising that what Professor Abdul Majid said, what Professor Qazi said, and what you said, and what we experience in India is exactly the same. So this problem of COPD being detected in women, non-smoking women, and ultimately being discovered to be because of biomass fuel consumption is actually something which is common to all the countries in this region. And there actually it shows the need for a cooperation and a combined unified approach to address the problems of this area. Thank you also for pointing out that actually SAARC has an important role to play, and that's exactly the purpose of this webinar today. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramesh. And again, now it's my pleasure to go to Dr. Nawang Norbu from Bhutan for his comments, please, before I come back to India to go to Dr. Rashna Hazarika. Dr. Norbu, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. May I begin by saying what a great honor it is for me to be talking to all doctors. By the way, I'm not a medical doctor, so but I do feel at home because I care a lot about the planet. As you know, compared to many other countries, Bhutan, in terms of environmental protection, we are performing relatively well. We are one of the few carbon negative countries in the world. I think there are some others. And we maintain still 70% of our land under forests. But as we all know, nevertheless, we are not spared from the negative consequences of climate change. Our glaciers are melting, as they are in Pakistan and some parts of India. Our rainfall patterns are changing, as one of the previous speakers alluded to, and there are freak weather events. And so climate change is taking a toll really on our ability to thrive as a species. Bhutan is also rapidly developing. Our population is growing. And I think one of the key things is the aspirations of the youth, because they are now more and more aligned to global narratives and global trends. And despite the fact that we subscribe as a country to the philosophy of gross national happiness, the desire for material wealth is only growing. So of relevance to our discussions today, if you look at just statistics, vehicle numbers in Bhutan have almost increased fourfold over the last less than 2 decades. And also because of that, fossil fuel imports have risen tremendously, almost increased 6-fold over the last 15 years. And most of these vehicles, by the way, are concentrated in major cities, in the capital and some other cities. So as you can imagine, they do then have an impact on life and health and other things. I want to point out that I think not only for Bhutan or not whether you are in the US or across the globe, I think the issue is with our philosophy. I think we have tended to believe more and more that well-being and prosperity can only be achieved by dependence on material things. That has caused a lot of our unhealthy dependence on fossil fuels, without realizing that because of that, we are destroying the very foundations of what makes life possible. I, for one, have always been a promoter that as a species, we still have to keep our feet on the earth, drink the water which flows on it, and breathe the air which is there. So I think it's time that we re-acknowledge and rekindle our appreciation for these ecological linkages which makes life possible. And then we must, by all means, do everything from electrification of cars or improving our stoves or whatever we have. I think the technology is there, but we must hasten our approaches. Because if we don't do it, then we are in for a serious problem, as all of us know. So ecological constituents which have a bearing on our health, such as air quality, unfortunately, is not the domain of one nation to solve. As we all know, dust and smoke from the plains of India and Bangladesh blows all the way across the Himalayas. And global warming also knows no boundaries. So while we measure and do actions to protect our environment within each country, I think, as rightly pointed out by the previous speakers, now is the time, I think, to amplify our efforts to strengthen global networks, maybe jig institutions such as the SAARC, because I think they're not as active as they should be, and really call for bold actions now, because we must allow our children to have a future where they can breathe clean air and drink from the deep wells of spirituality as well as nature. So thank you all very, very much for indulging me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Norbu. First of all, congratulations on two aspects. One is being a carbon negative country, and number two, being one of the highest countries on the happiness index, which is obvious on your face also. So congratulations on both the counts. And thank you very much for again highlighting the commonality of the problems. And also a very important aspect you pointed out, Dr. Norbu, that it is the youth who actually where lies one of the major areas. Youth are one of the major drivers of change. And I think there is a very clear but very solid message for all of us. And Shweta, we should take notice of this, that unless we can impress upon the youth the importance of clean air, I don't think any policy towards that will succeed. And we've seen that very clearly during our anti-cracker campaign also. You convince the parents, the youth, de-convince them, you convince the youth, and they can make the parents do exactly what they like. I think one of the clear messages today should be that it is the youth which we should be targeting very, very clearly, very strongly for our drive to succeed. Now I come back to India and request Dr. Rachna Hazarika, our clean air champion from Guwahati, to give her perspective. Rachna.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind and Lung Care Foundation. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I will not talk of how much air pollution we have. I think Dr. Kenneth has shown us such horrifying images of everything being red all across the country, including my region. You know, when I was working in Delhi, I thought it is the worst place to be, and I ran back home because ours is supposed to be really green and clean. And then you realize after staying here for a decade that you're back to square one, because I start getting my respiratory problems again. So that goes to show that areas of the country which were not previously affected by air pollution are now in the same box. We are all being affected by the effects of air pollution. And as a pediatrician, I think my focus is on the children. And it is very sad to see, I would like to highlight the fact that fossil fuels, because of the toxic particles, they have more than about 300 toxic particles which are released when they are burned, and the gases which are produced, and also the carbon dioxide, which adds to the climate problem. They all have a profound effect on the children, and this effect starts right in utero. So if the mothers are breathing in polluted air, the effects start on the fetus right inside. And I remember listening to Dr. Arvind when he was talking about air pollution, where he highlighted the fact that it is the younger people who are getting lung cancer these days, in his experience. Over the last decade or so, this has changed, because usually it was people above 50 or maybe above 60 who were getting lung cancer. And now it is young people at the age of 25, 30 who are getting lung cancer. So how does this happen? This happens because these babies have been exposed in utero to toxic gases, and then it continues after they are born. And in fact, I remember also from his presentation that nobody is a non-smoker in India, because everybody is smoking in the way because they are inhaling toxic air which is there in the country. So when everybody becomes a smoker, then obviously the effects of this pollution is going to have the effects that it has on the lung is going to be seen early. And that is the reason why we have so much of cancers, not only lung cancer, I think all other cancers, the incidences have increased. And in fact, Northeast is one of the areas where we have the highest incidences of all kinds of cancers in the country. The second issue which occurs when fetuses get exposed to these toxic chemicals is both a genetic and epigenetic effect. And because of that, the country are the highest producers of premature and low birth weight babies. And not only they are seen in the urban areas, we also see them in the rural areas, because, and we are increasingly seeing in our practice, because they are also exposed to the fossil fuels being burned in the kitchen. And if you look at the kitchen, it is, I think, one of the most badly made areas of a house where no importance is not given to ventilation, especially in the rural areas. It's a very closed kind of a atmosphere where you're burning wood, and the woman who is cooking, along with her, maybe the kid sitting next to her, is inhaling all the smoke during that period of cooking in the morning, in the daytime, as well as in the evening. And because of these preterm and low birth weight babies, there are also major effects seen in the cognitive function of these children. So obviously they will have low IQ, and they'll have a lot of cognitive problems as adults. And ultimately, it leads to a lot of economic burden to the country. So in my opinion, if you ask me as a pediatrician, I'm very biased towards babies. So if you ask me, if you want to hit hard where it matters the most, we will have to start talking of air pollution and the kind of horrible effects it has on babies, especially when the baby is in utero. And I think that kind of a messaging is going to impact the thinking of the population at large. So that is all I have to say. Dr. Arvind, thank you so much. And thank you again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Rachna. So that brings us to the end of this very, very encouraging landmark session, where we had guests from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and India, actually highlighting the similarity of the cause, the similarity of the effect, and the need for a unified regional approach which actually cuts across our borders rather than having individual approaches. And that encourages me to request my tech team to bring up a 5 commitment on behalf of Doctors for Clean Air, which we have, which I will read out, and I would request if our guests from the 5 countries could endorse that. So, way forward for a healthy fossil-free future. We recognize that air pollution and climate change knows no boundaries, and there is a need for urgent cross-border collaboration. I think everybody has already stated that. We pledge to work nationally and regionally to solve the air pollution crisis and prioritizing their health of patients and the community. I think we all stated this. We endorse the call for a fossil fuel-free world and the fossil fuel treaty. I think we all stated that as well. We call upon all South Asian governments to also ensure that the pandemic recovery investments, which are pouring in huge amounts, they also side by side support climate action and reduce social and health inequalities. Now that's a new point, and I would request all to endorse it if they agree. We call on South Asian governments to build climate resilient, low carbon, sustainable health systems, because we know that health systems are one of the contributors to the carbon crisis. We demand that the developed countries provide the promised transfer of funds to low-income countries to help us achieve the necessary mitigation and adaptation measures. Please put it off. Thank you. And I would request if all the champions from various countries could endorse it. Professor Chaudhary, if you agree with these statements. Thank you, sir. Professor Kazi, if you approve of these
yes,
pledges. Okay.
Yes,
Professor Ramesh.
Very much.
Professor Norbu.
We endorse it fully. Thank you.
Rashna.
Of course, sir. There's no other way out.
So there, Mr. Vashisht, there we have 5 leading countries and clean air champions from 5 leading countries publicly endorsing this treaty. And I think it's a historic day in the fight against air pollution and climate change in this area. And I take this opportunity to thank all the distinguished participants from Pakistan, Professor Majid Chaudhary and other colleagues who are present with him, Professor Qazi Ben Noor, Professor Ramesh Chokhani, Professor Norbu and Dr. Hazarika for their contribution. Thank you so much. Before I hand over to Shweta, I have a small announcement to make because youth were mentioned as an important area. We have another activity in the evening today, which is centered at youth. It's called Yuva Soch, Synergy Opportunities for Clean Air and Health, which is being organized by Doctors for Clean Air, United Nations Environment Program and Clean Air Fund. It's at 5 o'clock. The link for the same will be put in the chat box. If anyone is interested, you're most welcome. Thank you so much, Shweta, and over to you. Thank you. It was a pleasure conducting this session with the distinguished guests covering the 5 countries of the South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much, all distinguished panelists and health leaders from the region. And I know we are at time, but I'm going to request 4 minutes more. And I'm being very specific about 4 minutes. I mean, there were a lot of question and answers, and I've seen that a lot of our panelists have very actively responded, Ken especially. So thanks for that. I will not take up any more questions, but we have a video that sums up the commitments of all our health leaders and champions from the region. And I think this is a video that it would inspire more health professionals and more community and general public and young people to do their bit. So I would request the LCF team to please play this video endorsement, which is for 4 minutes. And with that, we will close the session today.
On this International Day of Blue Skies, I urge you to think about the harm caused by fossil fuels to the planet and its people.
By now, it is evident that increasing air pollution caused by burning fossil fuels can lead to an increased frequency of destructions globally, thus threatening human survival.
From rain on the Arctic to fires across the Boreal and the Amazon and the changing ocean currents, the warning signs couldn't be more clearer.
Few years back, we conducted a study on COPD, where we found that this disease is highly prevalent among the non-smoker village women. Subsequently, we investigated the matter, and it was discovered that the culprit behind this is use of fossil fuels in the cooking stoves.
This air pollution in some parts of the world is at extreme levels, exposing even the unborn fetus to the harmful effects of air pollution.
The combined effects of ambient, that is the outdoor, and household air pollution, that is the indoor air pollution, cause about 7 million premature deaths every year, largely as a result of increased mortality from stroke, heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lung cancer, and acute respiratory infections.
Research has shown that air pollution adversely affects every organ in the body. Children, elderly, and pregnant women are particularly vulnerable to the effects of air pollution.
We need to prevent this air pollution if we need to have a healthier individuals living in this earth and have productive lives.
I think it's the responsibility of us doctors community to not only guide people but arrange seminars and sensitize people so that everyone is aware of this great menace to human beings.
As a health professional, I see air pollution as a pressing public health issue and believe that moving away from fossil fuels will ensure that the air around us is fit for breathing. I endorse the Fossil Fuel Treaty.
It's a step towards healthy air and healthy planet for us all.
Let's make this world a nicer place to live for our future people.
It's time to renew our commitment to the world and restore our fractured relationship with nature.
Let us all join hands together and come to a consensus in mitigating air pollution for our present and future generations.
It is a step towards healthy air, healthy future, and healthy planet.
Thank you, LCF team. Dr. Kumar, would you like to mention a last few words before we close?
No, I think it was a very, very powerful video, and I would like to thank the clean air champions from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Dr. Rashna for providing the vital inputs. It is your statements, the power behind your statements, which has given the power to this video. And also thanks to the editors who have very crisply edited it, highlighting the role of SAARC as a region. Thank you very much. I think it's a very powerful video, and I would like to see this video going global and viral.
Thank you, sir. And just to add to Dr. Kumar's mention, I would also like to acknowledge and thank the 5 societies, associations from India: the Indian Chest Society, the Indian Pediatric Association, the Cardiological Society of India, Association for Surgeons of India, and Medical Students Association of India, who have also endorsed this treaty and have lent their support in advancing this message, in addition to our regional champions. And this is the power that the region and the health community in the region can bring and inspire others. So I would really like to thank everyone over here for making this session so enriching and this discussion so powerful. And I would also like to mention that this is not a one-off session. This is the beginning of the collaboration in the region, and I look forward to learning and getting inspired. Dr. Kumar, last words.
Before we wind up, I would repeat what you said, that this is not the end. This is not a one-off kind of event. I take this opportunity to extend an invitation to Professor Abdul Majid Chaudhry and his esteemed colleagues who are present with him, Professor Qazi Bannoor, Professor Chokhani, Professor Norbu, Professor Kenneth Lee, and everyone else to please become members, leaders of Doctors for Clean Air. It is a group without boundary, without any area-specific association. If you are a doctor and you are passionate about the cause of air pollution, this is the forum for you. and we all can contribute our knowledge, actions, and might to bring the issue in the forefront and to provide to our children, which I think is our foremost duty, and that is clean air to breathe. Shweta.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. And any last words and comments, Sanjay, as CANSA?
So it's great to see the regional cooperation, Shweta. That's what CANSA is all about, and I'm really happy to have built so many partnerships on this platform. Thank you.
Shweta, I think before we close, let's have 15-second messages from all our regional leaders, starting from Professor Abdul Majid.
Arvind, I think it has been a wonderful interaction amongst the leaders of the region. And I think we are all out to do anything and everything for the humanity in general, and particularly in this Southeast Asia. And we need to join hands. Well done, Arvind, and your team.
Thank you, sir. Professor Qazi Bennur.
I think that today is a history-making day. And inshallah, the regional cooperation will make this part of the world a very beautiful, pollution-free area in near future. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Qazi. Professor Ramesh Chokhani.
Well, it was a wonderful meeting, and I also endorse my other speakers, and we should all get united to fight against this menace which is around us and which is spoiling our health. And we need to do a collective, we need to join hands and fight collectively to improve the area around all of us in this region.
Thank you. Professor Norbu.
Thank you. I greatly enjoyed this. I look forward to working together closely and seeing how we can manage to keep the world safe for all of us. Thank you so much.
Dr. Rachna.
I think it was a wonderful beginning to something which we have to sustain for the future. And we have to hit hard and hit very fast. Otherwise, we'll be in a big mess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kenneth Lee.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure. And yes, it was an absolute pleasure and just fantastic to be part of the session. It was inspiring, as it always is, whenever I am interacting with the Doctors for Clean Air and Lung Care Foundation Network. Most of all, it's just so promising to see all of these leaders from across all the countries in South Asia come together with a common purpose to raise awareness in tackling this problem. So fantastic, historic moment. Well done.
Thank you. Over to you, Shweta.
Thanks, everyone. We have some resources, the video, a fact briefing, a briefing pack that we will share with everybody, all the participants via email. Thank you very much, everyone, and I look forward to this conversation taking shape in future.
Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Arvind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, sir.
Bye.